Everyone, I hope you're having an amazing day. So today we're going to talk about the data flows in Einstein. So if you haven't watched my previous episode, I would highly encourage you to go and check it out. I'll put the link in the description below for information. So we have created an app, and then we talked about the data set, we talked about dashboard, and we added filters right in the dashboard. So we're going to go and explore data flows today. And so for that reason, I've created a custom object. So I'm going to demonstrate in a moment. So one more thing, right? As usual. So after the Einstein, I'm going to talk about machine learning, right? So I'm going to talk about overfitting problem in machine learning today. So if you're someone who haven't watched my machine learning, right? If you only watched till my Einstein presentation, I would highly encourage you to go and check out my previous video before you attend today machine learning. But by all means, stay till Einstein, or if you want, you can stay till machine learning as well. The reason why you might be thinking, right, we are talking about Salesforce, why I'm talking about machine learning, right? The reason why I wanted to talk about machine learning, because Einstein is an analytics tool, right? And it does machine learning under the hood, right? And it's very important you to understand the basic concept associated with machine learning. I'm not talking very advanced concept, right? I'm not talking about fancy mathematical equations or complex ones. I try to avoid it as much as I can to give you a general perspective about machine learning so that you have a basic understanding, right? Because that's what I believe that everyone should understand, a basic machine learning concept before they dive into Einstein Analytics or any other Google Analytics or whatever tools you were using there, right? Excuse me. And I'm not using TensorFlows. I'm not using deep learning or PyTorch or anything. I'm not even using Python code here. This is just the basic introduction course for machine learning, right? So, okay, cool. So that being said, let's jump in. So first thing first, you need to log into your org. Einstein Analytics org. So if you don't know how to do that, I've talked about it in my previous lecture. I'll put a link below, as I mentioned before, in the description. Have a look at that video, right? Cool. All right. So what I've done. So today's agenda is I've already created a beer sold object. So So what I'm gonna do. So we have this object that's beer sold, and let me show you. And I've created some entries here. It's nothing fancy here, so let me go here. And this is a custom object created, so you got a beer sold name, quantity, total amount, which is auto-calculated using formula field, and I've linked it to account, right? I've linked it to two accounts. So one is the B1 account, another one is the B2 account. So what we're gonna do using a data flow, we're gonna extract beer sold data set, and then we're going to extract account data set, and we're going to join it, right? And then we're going to add the filter condition to it. That's pretty much all we're going to do today. Sounds straightforward, right? Okay, cool. Let's dive in. The first thing first, you need to go to this tic-tac-toe icon, go to Analytics Studio, and you can go to Data Manager using Gecko icon here. And you can go to Data Manager this way, or this Data Manager option on the left hand side. Either way, it will take you to that screen. Okay, and then you go to Data Flows and Recipes, right? And create a new data flow, right? Let's say demo data flow. Okay, and then we create it. We got a lot of options at the top here, right? The first one we're going to focus on is the digest, right? Okay, we click here, and we'll open up a nice window here, right? So node name, you can put any name you want. Let's say, because we are creating a data set here. So the first thing, we're gonna do the beer sold data set. So we're gonna do beer sold, right? Just D for data set, and source object. So we're gonna do beer sold. We select here, and select the fields, right? So we are interested in account field. And I'll tell you why in a second. And then I'm interested in quantity. Then I'm interested in and total amount. Right now, if you remember, I talked about creating two data sets, right? Beer sold and accounts. both are linked to each other, right? In a master detailed relationship. That's how I link together. So if you're combining them together, right, joining them together, you need to have a common key associated with them, right? And the common key is an account. Account ID is the common key because beer sold has an account ID and account object has an account ID, right? Okay, cool. So we're gonna create another one for the accounts. So it's pretty straightforward. Dataflow is very easy to use. If you start using it, you start loving it. So account, it's nothing complicated, right? It's not right. It's not that you have to write a complex code. You can do JSON stuff. I'm gonna talk about it in a minute. Okay, so we're gonna do account object here, and we're gonna select fields. So all I need here, a name. And perhaps name and perhaps ID. I might be interested. Oh, come on, what happened to that? So just gonna do name and I'm just gonna do ID. Okay, so that's all I'm interested into. Okay, now we have done this. See, now dataset is incomplete, right? Because this is just like we put two nodes on the canvas, but that's great. Now we need to join them together, right? And the way to join is using augmentation, right? There is something called Augment, right? So that will combine the data set together. I'll show you what I mean by that. Click on this Augment. So node name, let's say combine beer and account the data set, right? Left source. The left source is the child node. So beer sold is the child node. So we're going to take the beer sold and the left key. So this is where the key comes into picture, right? So the account is the key account, which is the account ID, right? All right, and relationship, you can name it as, let's say, ACC and B. Okay, that's fine. You can name whatever you want, just a meaningful name. So, okay, let's say account here, right? This sounds good? Cool. Right source. All right, so right source will be your account, right? And the right source key, as usual, is an ID. That's why we need an ID here, remember? Because account ID, it correlates to the account in the beer sold object, right? Okay, the right field, so you're gonna add these two fields here. And you don't have to worry about anything. That's it. See, these two are combined together, nice and easy. Right now we need to have one more option that's called the final thing, that's called register, because you need to register your data set, right? So you add here and I'm just going to do reg acc beer d source node. So remember the source node. So if you haven't used this augmentation, right, the joining stuff, you could have used either of them, but since the data has to come from the augmented, right? It's the joint data set, so we're going to choose this one, right? And alias, we're going to put it as, let's say, okay, ACC beer reg d, right? Account beer registration data. And name, we're going to say, put the same, right? Okay, and forget about the security and predicates. We're not going to worry about that right now, right? Because we want to just make it very simple. And we're going to update the data flow, right? You have to update it, otherwise you will not, and then you have to run the data flow, right? So it might take a minute, right? So you can see a lot of times the data flow fails and kind of stuff. So it may take a minute or sometimes take 20 seconds, depending upon the time it takes. Demo data flow, because that's running. So yeah, so this is many times, most of the times what happens that you get error, like something went wrong with this, something went wrong with this, so you need to troubleshoot. That's the common thing people sometimes struggle with. And there is something I would like to cover, that's SQL, SAQL query. So I will have to cover that in a separate session. Because you need to understand that, because it will be very handy if you're dealing with Einstein, right? So, all right, so we got the success, right? And so this is fantastic. Now let's go to data here. And if you remember, we have named it something accounts beer regd, right? So we go here and we're going to explore. Excuse me. Right. So we got, so we should see 5 rows here. So what we're going to do, we're going to do this by accounts beer dot name. You see, we got 2 data here, which is nice and easy. So the data set returns returns 5 results, which is correct, because if you go into the beer sold, there's a 5 data. So we don't have much data here. It's only the 5 records we have. So data set returns the 5 record, which is great. Now, I wanted to filter this data set, right? I wanted to display only the records from the belonging to this account. Can we do that? Yes, we can do that on a data flow, right? So we have something called filters. So we're gonna use the filters to do that. So we're gonna close this one, right? You're just gonna leave it. So we're gonna go to data flows recipes again and go to demo data flow, and so we're gonna click on this filter. So we say filter data flow, right? Source should be this. Please do not select the other source, because we have to do from here. And right, so you can use the SQL or you can use a regular one. I'm going to use the SQL here. So now here you need to pay a little bit of attention, right? So I'll show you why. Let me fail this first, okay? Let me go and fail this first, and you'll know what I mean by that. Okay, let me go and get this account, right? So we gonna do this very, okay, keep it here. And the most common problem which you will face, okay? Now you think, I wanted to add a filter condition, right? Pretty straightforward, right? It's a filter condition. So what is a filter condition? You say, you want to add a filter condition on accounts, right? And you've seen that account. Now, how do you add a filter condition, right? Because you can't put name equals to, account name. So let's say, if you remember, we have account beer dot name equals to, let's see what happens. Oh, you think, okay, this is a field name because alias dot the field name, right? So because the alias we define here and we create it here. So let's create it here, right? And now this is not over yet, because the filter is connected to this, but the register base is still linked to this combined beer. That needs to be changed. So you change it here, and we change it to filter data flow here. Okay, now there is a okay, now the thing is, so this is account beer here, so you save this. This is why the relationship name is very important, because we're gonna use this as an alias dot field name, right? So we're gonna take it here and we're gonna put it here, right? And save. Now you think it will work, right? Because we got a filter condition. We're telling to the data set. We have data set of 5 records, right? Now we are saying limit the data set only to accounts equals to B1 account, right? That should be 2 or 3. So whatever the B1 accounts is, let me see how much the B1 accounts. So that will be B1, B1, B1. So 3 records should. So the data set should returns 3 records, right? Because we have added the filter condition. Okay. The problem is it will fail. I'll show you why. Okay. This is where you need to pay special attention, and it will fail. There you are. Because something went wrong. Invalid filter, right? You say syntax error token equals to, right? Okay, so that's another problem. So go here. I'm telling you how to troubleshoot it. So this is troubleshooting session, right? Okay, it should be double equal, right? The first common mistake. Most people do it. I do that so often. So right now, update it and run Dataflow. Okay, and let's see what happens. It failed again. You see, name not supported outside our core group projection, which makes sense. The problem is you're using this cycle, right? It does not recognize what the name of this, right? So you have to put this in the quotes, and you do save, right? And you update it, and you update the flow, and let's see, and let's see what happens. Sometimes it takes time. It's running, so it's doing something. So hopefully it will work. So I'm trying to tell you the troubleshooting step because you might face these issues, and it's good to know. I'm telling from my experience. I've encountered this, so I struggle at times. So, but yeah, it's good to share. Another thing, right? So I say it's successful now. Okay, now let's go to the data, and we have count. There you are. See, we have reduced the a record to 3. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, let's test it. Explore it, and we're gonna add, and let's say the name. Voila, because we wanted to restrict it to B1 account. That's how you restrict the data set. It's very flexible. You can do a lot of stuff here. And there are other options as well, which I'm going to talk about in next time. So there is computational stuff. Hang on a second. So we compute expressions. We can do that as well. I'm going to talk about this compute expression next time. And one thing I just wanted to give an advice that if you have a data flow, right, please don't jump in and fix the changes. You need to take a backup first, right? So you have something called preview JSON, right? This is how the data flow looks like it, right? Cool. But you need to, before you modify existing data flow, please use the download JSON, right? And keep a copy aside, because for whatever reason, if you muck up the stuff, right, you can always upload the stuff back and retrieve the stuff back, right? So that's just one of the advice I wanted to tell you. At times it happens, you say, oopsie, I should have taken the backup, right? Just make it as a habit, right? If you're working on an existing data flow, please take download the JSON and keep a backup of whatever you do in your version control or whatever, right? So if you're using version control or SVN or GitHub or whatever you use, right, you can say keep it aside. So yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today. So I hope you guys find this session valuable. This is very easy to do that. Data flow is very easy. It's not a rocket science. You can do that. It's pretty straightforward. As you can see that you can connect to different data source. You can add 3-4 data set. You can make it combine. You need to understand what he's trying to do, right? And the cycle, right? SAQL. I would like to cover that in a separate session because you need to understand the basic queries, how to write, load statement and kind of stuff, right? Cool. All right. So that's all I wanted to talk about Einstein today. And now we're going to talk about machine learning, right? So if you are not comfortable with machine learning, you can jump out. That's fine. But if you wanted to stay, you're most welcome to stay. I'm not going to talk about complex equation like I did last time. I'm going to talk about very basic thing. I'm not going to take much time today. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about, okay, guys, if you're not staying for machine learning, thank you very much for your time today. I hope you have a great day. So people who are staying, let's dive into machine learning. So we're going to close this board here, right? And we're going to go to our nice, fancy editor. So if you remember, until now, what we cover, right? We talked about unsupervised and supervised, right? Supervised, where we are training our model with a labeled data set, right? And we're going to get an output, right? And then we pass on another data set, unknown data set. So obviously, the model is clever enough to train it. So there are two types of two types of model there we talked about. One is a classification, then another regression. So right, classification We talked about, like a Boolean variable, yes or no, whether that person has a cancer, but the person has not, do not have a cancer, whether he's a diabetic or is not a diabetic, right? Whether a person will fail or a person will pass, that kind of stuff, right? Classification, you're classifying stuff. Regression is like whether the house price will increase or decrease, or based on the different features that's been provided, right? And unsupervised is pretty interesting, right? The model has never seen the data before, so the model has to work out whether based on the right algorithm under the hood, right? And then put it into form of clusters or association, right? That's pretty straightforward. Well, it's not really straightforward, but that's the straightforward explanation. And then we talked about how to minimize the loss, right? We talked about the square error loss, and then we talked about gradient descent, right? And then we computer equations to find the value of intercept, and we assume the value of slope, right? Intercept is usually, when I talked about, it's like a bias, and slope is, the line. And then we use differential equation where we use the chain rule, right? And then we figured out the least local minima values where we reduce the error function. That's great. Now, something we're going to talk about overfitting today, right? So imagine this graph here, right? Just going to draw here. So we talk about two cases here, two samples. A person who got a diabetes, person who got a cancer, person who do not have a cancer, right? Very simple example. Person who got a cancer, just mark it as X, 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 X. Person who do not have a cancer, just mark it as dot, 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 dot. Yeah, and just make it X, just make it Y, right? Right, and we're just going to make it, X, right? Okay, now we can, so what happens is that we use our training data, right? And we decide to draw a model, something like this. And we think, okay, this is a pretty fairly decent model, so it's computes that, okay, these are the values are people with cancer, these are people with no cancer. It did a fairly good job, but it still missed out a few things. This one's here, right? And now, so what happens is that, let's say our model become more clever, right? And let me clear this one. And model become more clever and decides to do a complex model where it says, okay, let's cover all of the cases, right? And now our training set, right? Training set. We train this with the, say, 1,000 records or whatever, 1,000 entries, and we got this result. And we said, wow, it looks great. Now, what happens that we trained, we expose this to another data, right? And then we figured out, okay, so non-cancer cell comes here, cancer value fall here, cancer value fall here, people who have cancer falls here, people with cancer fall here. So you see that this model really doesn't work very well, right? This is not working because the way we made it extremely complicated to suit our training set, it's not working for a new data that's this model been exposed to, because you see, it's going outside the range, it's coming inside the range. So this is something called overfitting, what we call. The problem of overfitting is not really good, right? Because first of all, the model is very complicated and it's not giving us the good result, right? So we have two things we can do. So we need to solve the problem of overfitting. Overfitting is not a good solution. It's not a good model. So the common thing what we can do, right? We divide our data set, right? This is our data set into two parts. One is the training and one is the test, right? Let's say you have 1,000, right? You have 1,000 entry, 1,000 training data, right? 1,000 entries, right? So out of which 800 will be used for training and 200 will be used for test. It's like what we call that 80-20% rule. There's no fixed rule, but 20% for the training data is not bad. But make sure that before you use the data, right, it has to be randomized, right? For instance, you have a data which says mobile phones, which says iPads, right? If you have, let's say, 80% only 800 data only with mobile phones and 100 with 200 with iPad, that's not good, right? So you have to randomize so that you have mobile phone, you have a data with mobile phone, iPad, mobile phone, iPad in these two data sets, right? So now what happens is, so you first train the model with your training data, right? And it will draw a value, right? Let me clean this first, then we'll explain it more. So, let's just go here. I'm actually, okay, right. Right, never mind. I still have to learn to use this tool. All right. I mean, people use this tool for drawing stuff. I use it to teaching stuff, right? To writing stuff. Because I like fresh paint, but at times, yeah. Yeah, next time I'm going to learn a little bit more on this tool. Yeah, barely getting time. That's the main thing, you know, so much of stuff going on. But all right, okay, never mind. Sorry, I digress. All right, so what we're going to do, so we talked about the training set, right? So this is our training, so this is our training data. And let's say you got a training data here. We got training data here, X. This is for the cancer, and this is for the non-cancer, right? And let's say you have fairly okay model, right? And you have, let's say, X. So let's say this is your training data, right? And then you use the test data, right? This is your test data. And you get something like this. It's fairly similar, right? So it hasn't done very well, but both the cases hasn't done very well. So this is more similarly associated with each other. So that means the model is fine. I mean, please remember that do not train your model with the test data. Please, for heaven's sake, no. If for whatever reason you reach a day where you say, oh, my model is perfect, it's passing everything, then you realize it's a test data. No, that's not good. You should not train your model on your test data. It should be trained on the training data, and test data you should use to test it, right? So this is one of the concepts of overfitting. We use a concept called regularization, right? I will explain to you that in the next video. I'm going to have to explain a little bit of equation as well. So for now, this is all I wanted to cover today. Nice and easy, very simple thing, right? Because overfitting is a problem, so you need to build your model in such a way that it should not overfit, it should not underfit, right? And where it doesn't fit at all, right? And where overfitting really try to make the model super complicated. The simple thing is to keep the model simple, right? And then, sometimes what happens is that you will be tempted to say, oh, let me take out the features, right? And when you have a large feature set, the problem of overfit will come. Then you will come to get tempted to say, oh, look, let me take out some of the features. My model will work. The problem is that if you take out some of the features, right, you will tend to lose information, which might be very useful in your output prediction, right? And let's say your let's say the feature sets to calculate the house price, right? And in that, there are feature sets like the number of bedrooms, right? And the size of the house and the location. Let's say if you decide to take the number of bedrooms off to reduce the feature, that's really won't be a good solution because the number of bedrooms plays a very important role in determining the house price, right? So you need to keep that into mind. So we're going to talk about the regularization next time. So that will make it more clear. So this is one of the very important concepts in machine learning. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. Nice and easy, all right? So we talked about training data, test data, right? And we said that if you have a large data set, split it into 80-20, 80% used for training, 80% part used for training, and 20% part used for test data. If your test data and training data gives you similar result on a model, that's fairly okay, right? But if your test data and model training data are drastically different, then there is a problem there. You need to work out that stuff. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. So thank you very much for watching, and wherever you are, greetings and adios from New Zealand.